don't think has gotten enough attention, at least locally, because we're busy, is the Brady tampering with the Dolphins. And you, along with Karen Gregan, have been on Brady stuff since his first days, more than anybody else. No better person to talk to. You described it, I think, as was it a dent in the legacy in that tweet?
Yeah, it leaves a dent on his legacy.
Okay, so to recap, for those not totally familiar with it, is basically that Brady had impermissible contact with the Dolphins throughout the 2019 season. It started in August at the exact same time his last negotiations with the Patriots concluded and soured. And then he put his house up for sale. So none of that, obviously, an accident, considering he knew he was going to leave New England. Had a little side piece conversation going on with the Dolphins. Didn't materialize. Did it the same with the Bucs all last year. I think this has been mollified a little bit from a fan standpoint because time has just passed. Like any past relationship, any breakup, things aren't as bad. But if this was the year later, or say this news came out before the Bucs rolled in here in week 4, do you think the reaction is much different?
Yeah, I do think the reaction is different. And I think that the reaction is different had he ended up with the Miami Dolphins. Had that happened and you learned that he was having a dalliance with them throughout the season, that would have been something that you would have found unacceptable. And I think that's the interesting thing about this for Brady and his legacy here. Look, in 4 years, it's going to be a footnote. In 30 years, you'll have to remind people it even happened. But for right now, and the reason it's important is this is the most historic franchise in pro football history. Steelers fans, Cowboys fans, Raiders fans, Bears fans. I don't care how long your team's been around or what George Halas did for you or Curly Lambeau.
Well, they're all listening, so thank you for saying that. That was needed, yeah.
This team authored the greatest 20-year run in NFL history, and that's always going to be the case. So how it ended, why it ended, and the circumstances around its ending do demand scrutiny. And that's why we talk about this now. So why would a player, after 20 years of eating a poop sandwich with no bread financially, finally say in 2019, you know what? How about this? How about I talk to the Dolphins and see whether or not they want me? And I don't talk to them after the season.
No.
I don't talk to them after, just when I'm about to become a free agent. I start in August. That to me was when my jaw dropped a little bit as somebody who, knew and knows him very well and the people around him very well, and not just his family, but the coterie of folks who work with him, Alex Guerrero, Don Yee, Brady. So I was surprised and stunned that it started then, but I know why it started then.
Right. And I think it's interesting, too, because it colors, in retrospect, the light of Brady's last season a little bit differently, where he's declaring himself the most miserable 8-0 quarterback in NFL history to Chris Collinsworth before they lose that game on Sunday night to the Ravens. But we could see even at the podium after wins was just kind of miserable. We assumed then, once we found out he wanted to leave or knew he was going to leave, kind of the suffering in silence. There wasn't so much silence going on. It was just these quiet conversations to the side, which, Jeff Darlington had drug up that, the possibility of him playing and being an owner, or, an executive, whatever, probably was never going to come to light because that requires approval from all 32 owners. Robert Kraft is going to come in with a no, I would assume, along with now the Tampa Bay Bucs if he had attempted this last offseason. So I think, well, let's stick with Kraft here for a second, because it is a dent. It depends on your perspective, a fan, how long you've been a fan of, how big of a dent, what you think of Brady. Robert Kraft hears this yesterday. Your best guess or sense of his reaction to that?
Well, I did ask if we could get a comment from Robert, and was told that he won't be commenting on this topic. Probably hurt. Maybe mad. But the interesting thing, again, we have to dredge up the full context of it. Who betrayed who first?
Yeah.
Because as far as Tom Brady's concerned, the Patriots quit on him before he quit on them. And nobody necessarily quit on the other, but they didn't do all they could for each other. And I think Brady felt that way, because if you look at, first they draft Garoppolo and they talk about his contract and age, then they don't have his back so much in 2016 during the Flakegate, which, never know. You never know. Which we had some noise.
Here's Robert now.
Very easily distracted. Didn't necessarily have his back during Deflategate. 2017 rolls around and
miserable season. They're nickel and diming him. They don't want to move on from Garoppolo. They finally do. He's pissed off. They're still not giving him an extension, which he's asking for over and over again. He wants to finish his career here. He's begging for it. He's asking Kraft to do something, and nothing's happening.
Then they give him that shit bum contract with 5 $1 million escalators to bring him in line with like Kirk Cousins money.
Yeah, Derek Carr, all that. Yeah.
And he's like, what are we doing? Why am I continuing to walk to these people hat in hand? And then in August of 2019, he's expecting finally the 2-year, $50 million fully guaranteed contract that was given to Drew Brees. Told he's going to get it. And when he doesn't get it, he says, you know what? It's not just you, Bill. It's you, Robert, because I've always dealt with you. But now I can't find you, and I'm dealing with him. And what am I getting? I'm getting the high hat. So as a result, all bets are off. You're not going to get happy-go-lucky, worry about everybody Tomming anymore. And it's interesting the way the season played out. I'm sure Brady was over the moon when they had Antonio Brown.
Yeah.
Yet his anger got funneled towards Robert Kraft again when the walkaway came.
Right.
So it was very messy. And that is the way this, as Mr. Brady said a long time ago, it will end messily. And it did.
Yeah. And
they put a nice gauze on it, haven't they?
Yeah. Well, someone ripped the gauze off today in my mentions saying, oh, look, the whole time we were told that, Brady wanted to leave, and the media would push back and say, well, Belichick actually pushed him out. Now there's a back and forth. I think there's an understanding here for the reasons you just outlined. The reason that Brady wanted to leave was spurred on by a lot of the Patriots' 100%. Own actions, which just boiled down to the contract in 2019 was, as you say, shit bum with the incentives. It was not beyond that season. And then come the 2020 offseason, there's no firm offer from the Patriots anyway. I don't think there could be two clearer signs that we don't want you here any longer, let alone all the history that seemed to be patched up at least temporarily in 18 when they just casually win a 6th Super Bowl.
Right.
So now for Bill, because I get to ask him this here today, did you have any idea that your starting quarterback was being tampered with by the Dolphins, which that's a two-way conversation. And of course, his is, we're focused on training camp, blah, blah, blah in the past. Like at that point, it was clear he wanted to move on. It sounds like they made up based on the conversation they had here after that Sunday night game. I can't imagine he cares a whole lot about this, but I'd imagine it's a little bit more than, well, we're just focused on training camp here today.
I think that Bill cares about his legacy and what's said. And I think that he probably does a very small, quiet, silent victory lap to say, yeah, see, maybe it wasn't all me.
Yeah.
But it was all you. And anyone who doesn't believe that to be the case is being disingenuous about the landscape. There was a point at which Bill held the door open for 6 years. And Tom kept saying, I don't want to go yet, but I don't want to go. And you keep holding the door open. When he walks through it, how does he act on the other side? Or maybe while you're still holding the door open, he starts acting on it. But this was invited by the Patriots. And I think in that offseason, if you look at that pre-free agent conversation that Brady had with Belichick, spoke to people around him right after the conversation was ended, was told Bill's acting like he's still under contract here. What he was told was, you'll get no more than $22.5 million against the cap from us this year. We can't do it. We're not going to do it. Again, that's a lot. But it's a fraction of what quarterbacks who are half as good as him.
It's, again, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins kind of money.
So once Brady saw that, I mean, it was half-assed, half-hearted, listless efforts to keep him around. Does not excuse, by any stretch of the imagination, August dalliances when you're at practice with the Patriots. I'm curious, and I had a conversation with somebody within the team today as to who they thought we thought, in just a casual conversation, initiated it. My guess is it would have been Brady's side, because it had to dovetail with, hey, I didn't get the contract. You know what? Why don't we call Bruce down with the Dolphins and see what's going on, because I'm not going to put up with this.
Because you know what, too? I mean, Bruce Beal and Brady are good friends. That's been documented. And at that point, too, if you're the Dolphins looking in on Brady, you're going, just let's get him out of the division. Not the next step of let's bring this guy into a full-on rebuild as we're tearing this thing down to the studs. Brian Flores is here. That might be attractive. But for a guy who's into his 40s, we're probably a year or two away. We make a phone call, but you're not doing that at that point in the season as they're building everything up with Brian Flores. So from Kraft, Belichick, Brady angles, I think, frankly, the more damning part for Brady's legacy is not going to be things that affected him in that season, but the stuff that was going on with the Buccaneers, who gave him the contract that he wanted, who allowed him to play kind of shadow GM to a certain extent down there. And yet he's still talking with Miami, retiring, then trying to get out of the contract and go to the Dolphins. And none of that really works out, which I guess it's good for his sake in the legacy part that Miami and Stephen Ross are so ham-handed about this, because a lot of this couldn't have worked out or didn't need to come to light. But it did, and part of that's tied to Brian Flores. Not that we care so much about the Bucs angle, but is there anything else we haven't covered before we moved on to the Patriots like Bill has?
just, I think that the legacy aspect, it's not going to have a lasting dent, on him. I think it's going to be able to be buffed out and ignored because it's just a huge tapestry. And this is what we're focused on now, the tiny little stain on it. But I think it's going to fade. But it is arresting, I think, to see that news, and surprising to see that news. And for Bill, for the three of them, all it takes, everybody loves the forgiveness aspect, and all will be forgotten if and when, and that'll be interesting too.
He's pointing out to the Gillette Stadium field for the folks at home. We're in the press box.
See if he takes, has a Patriots Hall of Fame induction ceremony.
Yeah.
Because again, it's Kraft that he was pissed off at.
Yeah.
Bill was being Bill. Kraft, in Tom Brady's mind, is the one who changed the way he operated. Because it was always Tom and Kraft worked on the contract, and then he couldn't find Robert, and he was left to deal with Bill. So when you see the retirement speech saying, doesn't mention the Patriots, that is directed specifically towards ownership, not to Bill.
Yeah.
So
Bill's going to be Bill. And the other thing about this too, because the hurt is obviously real now and it'll fade. And we just talked about the, passing of time is going to have that. Brett Favre got to go back to Green Bay and have his day. We don't forget everything that happened with him and the Jets, retiring again, unretiring, going to the Vikings, pulling off what Brady tried to do and going to the rival and winning and nearly going to a Super Bowl. And Brett Favre only had one Super Bowl win. So for the 6 Super Bowls and everything that happened, I ran a very unscientific Twitter poll, as you will do on occasion.
Yes.
And the leading return in terms of responses, which was not 50%, but how does this affect what you think of Tom Brady's career, was not at all, at about 40. Mm-hmm. So 60% say, yeah, I'm a little ticked too, very ticked, and screw him. And there was 24% there. I think the 24% is going to dwindle over time. Everyone's going to be, but like Spygate or Deflategate or any of these things, footnotes. And this will be a footnote locally, certainly not nationally.
It was funny because, I put out a quick Twitter thread on the reasoning behind why Brady would have done this. And I said at the end of it, this is explaining why he would act out of character, not excusing it. And in the first, I would say 30 minutes, the replies that I got were from the people who most disliked Brady and or me in being a Brady ball washer, and continually said I would bend over backwards. But as the day went along, when I checked later on, like last night, there were many more people who said, who had the complete opposite reaction to it. One other thing that I want to say before we move on is, whether it's Bill Belichick fleeing authoritarian Bill Parcells to come to the Patriots, Tom Brady fleeing authoritarian Bill Belichick to go to Miami, or Bill Parcells trying to flee ultra meddling Robert Kraft to go to the Jets. This is de rigueur as far as we're concerned in this market. It happens all the flipping time. This is how these guys act. Now, you would never, because I know that you are dyed in the wool, you bleed Herald ink. But if it got to a point where they're like, we're going to move on from this guy, somebody who's less of a man than you might call around and say, I wonder if there's someplace else I can land.
Yeah, and just say this is business. It's not personal at that point, which is how Bill treated their relationship the entirety of the time. Robert Kraft did not up until that last year or two, as you're describing.
They keep sending you out there with a shitty laptop.
This is my personal laptop.
But if they keep sending you out,
no, I got you. Yeah.
Can't get your stories.
That might say enough. Yeah.
You might eventually say, look, who gave up on who first? They won't give you a good laptop.
Right. Hey, there is a Herald in Miami, so who knows?
Are they all linked?
No.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. We won't find out soon enough.